My husband lost everything, so I fed him from my small business. Every morning while others slept, I stood under the hot sun frying akaras, saving every coin just to keep food on our table. I believed in him when nobody else did. I gave him my last money to attend a job interview. And when he got the job, I thought our struggles were finally over. But that was the beginning of my nightmare. The man who once couldn't survive without me became a stranger overnight. He bought a mansion, that he bought a car, that he told me to stop working. And then one day he looked me in the eyes and said I was no longer good enough for his new life. That same man I carried through his darkest days threw me out of our home like I was nothing. I had nowhere to go, no money, no family, no hope. I slept under a bridge fighting hunger, cold, and heartbreak. But what he didn't know was, this, the same woman he abandoned, was about to rise in a way he could never imagine. And the day our paths crossed again, he was no longer the man who left me. He was the one begging, "Stay with me," because this story will leave you speechless. Hello, friends. Before we dive into the story, take a quick second to like this video and hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel grow and keeps these amazing stories coming your way. Now let's get into it. The heat that afternoon was unforgiving. It pressed down on the corrugated zinc roof of the small shack like a heavy hand, trapping the warmth inside until the air itself felt thick enough to swallow. The walls, patched together with uneven planks and sheets of rusted metal, did little to keep the sun out. Instead, they seemed to absorb it, radiating discomfort into every corner of the single-room home. Okafor sat near the doorway where a faint breeze occasionally slipped in, as though the outside world pitied him enough to send relief in small doses. His elbows rested on his knees. His fingers were clasped tightly together, knuckles pale, as if he were holding himself in place, or perhaps holding himself together. Outside, life moved on. Children ran barefoot down the dusty road, their laughter ringing through the air. A woman called out prices for roasted corn. A radio played high life music from somewhere down the street. The world was alive, vibrant, indifferent. But inside the small house, everything felt paused, muted, heavy. Okafor's eyes followed nothing in particular. They drifted unfocused, landing occasionally on objects that told the story of a life that had slowly unraveled. The empty corner where a small television once sat, the cracked plastic table with one uneven leg, the thin mattress rolled against the wall. Fragments of better days. He let out a slow breath. Came out heavier than he expected. There had been a time not long ago when he woke up with purpose, when his shirt was ironed, his shoes polished, and his mind filled with plans for the day ahead. He had been a man. People respected a man whose voice carried weight, a man his wife looked at with pride. Now he avoided mirrors, because mirrors had a way of telling truths he wasn't ready to face. "You're still sitting there." The voice came gently, but it cut through the silence. Okafor turned his head. Diana stood at the entrance, a tray balanced carefully in her hands. Sweat glistened on her forehead, tracing lines down her temples, but her posture remained steady. Her wrapper was tied securely around her waist, and her blouse, though worn, was clean. She stepped inside, nudging the door open with her foot. "I thought you might be hungry," she said, setting the tray down on the small table. The aroma hit him instantly. Beans. Simple, familiar. It wasn't much, but it was something. Okafor looked at the plate, then at her. "You didn't have to rush back," he said quietly. "Your customers, they can wait." Diana replied, cutting him off softly. "My husband cannot." There was no sarcasm in her voice, no resentment, just truth. And somehow, that made it worse. Okafor swallowed hard and looked away. Diana noticed, but she didn't press. Instead, she moved about the room, adjusting small things, straightening the cloth on the table, folding the wrapper, draped over the chair. Busy hands, quiet understanding. She had learned that silence could be kinder than questions. Still, she couldn't ignore it forever. "You didn't go out today?" she asked gently. The question hung in the air. Okafor stiffened. "No." Just one word. Flat, final. Diana paused, then turned, to face him fully. "Okafor." He sighed, dragging a hand over his face. "I'm tired, Diana." She stepped closer. Of what he let out a dry laugh. Of trying, of walking from office to office just to be told they'll get back to me. Of watching younger men I train sit behind desks while I stand there like. He trailed off, shaking his head. Like what she asked softly, like I don't matter. The words landed heavy. Diana felt them, but she didn't. Let them settle. "You do matter," she said firmly. He shook his head again. Not anymore. There it was, the truth. He had been carrying the truth that had been slowly eating away at him. Diana moved closer and sat beside him. "Look at me," she said. He hesitated, then did. Her eyes held his, steady, unwavering. "This is not the end of your story," she said. "It's just a hard chapter." Okafor's lips twitched slightly, but he didn't respond. She continued. "Do you remember? When we first got married," he exhaled slowly. "Of course. We had nothing," she said, a faint smile forming. "Not even this little house. We stayed in that one room behind your uncle's shop." Okafor chuckled softly despite himself. "The leaking roof," he added. "Yes," she laughed. "Any time it rained, we had to shift the bed from one corner to another." "And that stubborn rat," he said. "The one that refused to leave." They both laughed. For a moment the weight lifted. For a moment they were back in a time when struggle felt like adventure instead of defeat. Diana's expression softened. "We survived that," she said. "We built something from nothing." Her voice dropped slightly. "And we will do it again." Okafor looked at her. Really looked at her. At the woman who woke before dawn every day, who stood for hours under the sun selling food, just to keep them afloat, who came home tired but still found the strength to smile, who still believed in him, even when he didn't. "Diana," he began, his voice breaking slightly. She reached for his hand. "Eat first," she said gently. "Then we'll talk about everything else." He nodded. Slowly he picked up the spoon. Each bite felt heavier than the last, not because of the food, but because of the reality it represented. His wife was feeding him, providing, carrying the weight he once carried with ease. Shame crept in again, quiet but persistent. "I should be the one doing this," he murmured. Diana didn't flinch. "You will," she said simply. He glanced at her. "You're very sure?" "I am." "Why?" She smiled. "Because I know the man I married." Silence followed, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was hopeful. Outside the sun began to dip slightly, casting longer shadows across the dusty road. Diana stood up. "I have to get back to the stall," she said. "The evening crowd will come soon." Okafor nodded. As she reached the door she paused. Then she turned back. "Tomorrow," she said, "go out again." He opened his mouth to protest, but she raised a hand playfully. "No arguments." He sighed, but there was a faint smile on his face. "All right." She grinned. "That's my husband." And just like that she was gone, stepping back into the noise, the heat, the struggle, but also the fight. Okafor sat there for a while after she left. The house felt quiet again, but not as empty. Her words lingered. Her belief lingered. Slowly he stood up and walked to the small mirror nailed to the wall. He stared at his reflection. The man looking back at him wasn't the same man he used to be. But maybe, just maybe, he wasn't finished becoming who he was meant to be. Okafor straightened his shoulders slightly. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Outside, the world kept moving. And for the first time in a long time he felt like he might move with it. The morning sun had barely risen when Diana stepped out of the house, tying her wrapper tightly around her waist as she balanced a tray of food ingredients on her head. The air was cooler at this hour, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and wood smoke. It was the only time of day that felt gentle, the only time the world didn't seem to demand so much from her all at once. Behind her, the small house stood still. Okafor was still asleep or at IH-teen, least pretending to be. Diana paused briefly at the doorway and glanced back inside. For a moment her eyes softened. She knew he hadn't been sleeping well. The restless turning, the quiet sighs, the long hours staring into darkness. It hurt her more than she let on, but she didn't wake him. Instead, she whispered softly, almost like a prayer. Today will be better. Then she turned and began walking down the narrow, dusty path that led to the roadside. By the time, the sun climbed higher into the sky. Diana's small food stall was alive with activity. Her setup was simple: a wooden table, a charcoal stove, a few pots, and a makeshift shade constructed from an old umbrella patched in several places. It wasn't impressive, but it was hers, and more importantly, it worked. Hot Akara fresh pap. She called out, her voice warm and inviting. Customers began to gather. Some were regulars, people who greeted her by name, who trusted her cooking, who lingered a little longer just to exchange a few words. Others were passers-by drawn in by the smell of fried bean cakes sizzling in hot oil. Diana, make mine extra pepper, one man said, grinning. You and your pepper. She laughed. One day your mouth will run away from you. The small crowd chuckled. For a moment everything felt normal, but even in the middle of laughter, her mind drifted back home to Okafor, to the quiet heaviness in his eyes. She shook the thought away and focused on her work. One step at a time, she reminded herself. It was mid-afternoon when the crowd began to thin. The sun was now harsh, beating down relentlessly, forcing most people to seek shelter. Diana wiped sweat from her forehead with the edge of her wrapper and stretched her back slightly. That was when they arrived. Two well-dressed women approached the stall, their heels clicking against the uneven ground. Their outfits stood out. Neatly pressed skirts, polished shoes, handbags that spoke of a different kind of life. Diana straightened instinctively. Good afternoon, Ma, she greeted politely. Good afternoon, one of them replied, scanning the setup with mild curiosity. What do you have, Akara and Pap, Ma? Fresh and hot. All right, give us 2 portions. Diana moved quickly, serving them with care. As they stood nearby waiting, the women began to talk. Casually, at first, but loud enough to be heard. I'm telling you, this opportunity is big, one said, adjusting her sunglasses. They're expanding fast. I know, the other replied. My cousin said the salary alone is enough to change someone's life. Diana's hands slowed slightly. She wasn't trying to listen, but she couldn't help it. Where is the interview again? The second woman asked. Tomorrow, 9:00 a.m. sharp, at that new corporate building near the Express. Diana's heart skipped. Tomorrow. She kept her head down, pretending to focus on pouring pap into cups. What position? The second woman continued. Administrative and operations roles. They said they want people with experience, but honestly, if you can present yourself well, you have a chance. Diana swallowed. Experience. Okafor had that. Plenty of it. Her fingers tightened slightly around the ladle. Did you bring your documents? The first woman asked. Of course. Everything is ready. I'm not missing this. Diana quickly handed them their food. Thank you, Ma, she said, her voice steady despite the thoughts racing through her mind. The women paid and moved to the side, continuing their conversation as they ate. Diana tried not to stare, tried not to hope, but hope had already found its way in. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Her movements became automatic. Serve. Collect money. Smile. Repeat. But her mind was elsewhere. Tomorrow, 9:00 a.m., corporate building near the Express. She repeated the details over and over, afraid they might slip away. By the time she packed up her stall, her body was exhausted, but her spirit felt different. Lighter. She balanced the empty pots and utensils and began the walk home, her pace quicker than usual. Each step carried urgency, excitement, fear. What if this was it? What if this was the opportunity they had been waiting for? The sun had begun to set when Diana reached home. The sky was painted in soft shades of orange and purple, the kind of beauty that often went unnoticed, but not today. Today, she noticed everything. She pushed the door open. Okafor was sitting in the same spot as the day before, but this time he wasn't staring into nothing. He was staring at the floor, lost in thought. Okafor, she called gently. He looked up. You're back, he said. She set her things down quickly. I heard something today, she said, her voice carrying a quiet urgency. He frowned slightly. What is it? There's an interview. Tomorrow morning. He blinked. An interview? Yes. A big company. They're hiring. Okafor leaned back slightly, skepticism already forming. There are always companies hiring, he said. That doesn't mean. This one is different. She cut in. Softly. He studied her face. She wasn't just hopeful. She was certain. Where? Clear's throat. Did you hear this? He asked. Two women came to the stall. They were talking about it. The salary is good. The opportunity is real. Okafor exhaled slowly. And you think I should go? I know you should. Silence filled the room. He looked away. What if it's the same thing? He said quietly. What if I go and they look at me the same way? Everyone else does. Diana stepped closer. Then you go again somewhere else, she said. And again until something changes. He shook his head slightly. You make it sound easy. It's not, she replied. But it's possible. She reached into the small pouch tied at her waist and pulled out a few crumpled notes. Carefully, she placed them in his hand. For transport, she said. Okafor stared at the money. It wasn't much, but he knew what it cost her to save it. Every coin represented hours under the sun. Every note carried the weight of her effort. I can't take this, he said, his voice low. You can, she replied firmly. No, Diana, you can. She repeated, closing his fingers around it. Her eyes softened. Let me do this, she said. Just like you would have done for me. That hit him. Hard. He looked at her, really looked this time, at the strength behind her kindness, at the quiet determination that refused to break. Tomorrow, she said gently. Go and show them who you are. Okafor swallowed. His doubts were still there. His fear hadn't disappeared, but something else had risen alongside them. A small, stubborn spark. All right, he said finally. Diana smiled. Not a big smile. Not dramatic. Just enough. Because she knew sometimes all it takes is a whisper of opportunity and the courage to follow it. The morning came faster than Okafor expected. It felt like he had only just closed his eyes when the faint light of dawn began to seep through the cracks in the wooden walls. For a few seconds, he lay still, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet rhythm of early morning. The distant crow of the soft rustle of leaves, the low hum of life beginning again. Then it hit him. Today, he sat up slowly. The money Diana had given him slightly crumpled from how tightly he had held onto it in his sleep. He stared at it for a moment, his chest tightening. It wasn't just money, it was belief. Behind him, Diana was already awake. She moved quietly, careful not to disturb the fragile weight of the moment. She had risen even earlier than usual, finishing her chores quickly so she could be there before he left. "You're up," she said softly. Okafor turned. She stood by the small table, holding out a neatly folded shirt. His shirt. The best one he had left. "I washed it last night," she said. "It's dry." Okafor took it from her, running his fingers over the fabric. It was worn but clean, carefully prepared. Like him. "Thank you," he murmured. Diana smiled gently. "Go and bathe. I'll warm some food." A short while later, Okafor stepped out of the house. The morning air felt different today. Cooler, sharper, filled with something he couldn't quite name. Possibility. He adjusted his shirt, smoothed down the front, and took a deep breath. Diana stood in the doorway watching him. "Remember," she said, "walk in there like you belong." He gave a small nod. Then he turned and began walking. The journey felt longer than it should have. Every step toward the main road seemed to echo with doubt. What if they reject me? What if I embarrass myself? What if I'm no longer good enough? He clenched his jaw and pushed the thoughts aside. Not today. Today he would try. By the time he reached the Yi Pia corporate building near the Express, the sun had risen fully, casting a bright glow over the glass structure that stood tall against the skyline. Okafor stopped in his tracks. For a moment he simply stared. The building was intimidating. Sleek glass walls, uniformed security guards, well-dressed individuals walking in and out with confidence. It was a different world, and for a second he felt like he didn't belong in it. He looked down at his shoes, polished but old. He looked at his shirt, clean but faded. A flicker of doubt returned. Then Diana's voice echoed in his mind. "Walk in there like you belong." He straightened his shoulders, took a breath, and stepped forward. Inside, the reception area buzzed with activity. Dozens of applicants sat in rows, clutching folders, adjusting ties, rehearsing answers under their breath. Okafor hesitated near the entrance. He wasn't the only one, but he felt like the only one who had everything to lose. Next, a receptionist called out. He moved forward, handing over his documents. "Have a seat," she said without looking up. Okafor nodded and found an empty chair. Time passed slowly. Each name called felt like a drumbeat against his chest. One by one, candidates disappeared into the interview room and returned. Some looked hopeful, others defeated. Okafor watched them. All studied them, prepared himself. Then Mr. Okafor. His name sounded unfamiliar in that space. He stood up. For a split second his legs felt heavy. Then he moved. The interview room was quiet, professional. 3 panelists sat behind a table, their expressions neutral. "Good morning," one of them said. "Good morning," Okafor replied, his voice steady, surprisingly steady. "Please have a seat," he said. His heart pounded, but he didn't let it show. "Tell us about yourself," another panelist said. The question was simple, but it carried weight. Okafor paused briefly, then he began. He spoke about his experience, his years of work, the responsibilities he had handled, the challenges he had overcome. He didn't rush. He didn't exaggerate. He told the truth, and something shifted. The panelists leaned in slightly. "Why did you leave your previous job?" one asked. Okafor hesitated. This was the part he dreaded, but he remembered. Diana again. "Be honest." "There were downsizing decisions," he said. "I was affected." A brief silence. Then, "And what have you been doing since then?" Okafor took a breath. "I've been trying," he said simply. The panelists exchanged glances. He continued, I've attended interviews. I've faced rejection. But I haven't stopped believing that I still have something to offer. That did it. Something in the room changed. The atmosphere softened. Why should we hire you? Another asked. Okafor leaned forward slightly. Because I know what it means to lose everything, he said, and I know what it takes to rebuild. His voice was calm but firm. I won't take this opportunity for granted. Silence followed, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was thoughtful. Thank you, Mr. Okafor, the lead panelist said finally. We'll be in touch. Okafor nodded. Thank you for your time. He stood, turned, and walked out. The moment he stepped outside, the tension released. He exhaled deeply. He didn't know if he got the job, but he knew one thing. He had shown up fully, honestly, and for the first time in a long while he felt proud of himself. Back home, Diana waited. Every sound made her glance toward the door. Every passing minute stretched endlessly. Then the door opened. Okafor stepped in. Their eyes met. Well, she asked, unable to hide the anticipation in her voice. He shrugged slightly. I did my best. Diana smiled. That's enough. Days passed. Each one slower than the last. Hope battled with uncertainty. Then one afternoon the phone rang. Okafor froze. Diana looked at him. Answer it, she whispered. He picked up. Hello? A pause. Then, Mr. Okafor, we're pleased to inform you. He didn't hear the rest, not clearly, because in that moment everything changed. He got the job. Diana screamed, not gracefully, not quietly. She screamed with joy, with relief, with everything she had been holding in. You got it, she shouted, jumping into his arms. Okafor laughed, really laughed for the first time in months. I got it, he said, almost in disbelief. They held each other tightly. In that small, worn-out house, it felt like a palace. They danced. They laughed. They forgot, even if just for a moment, everything they had been through. That night they ate together simple food, but it tasted like celebration. Diana watched him as he spoke, her eyes shining. You see, she said softly, I told you. Okafor looked at her, and something deep inside him shifted. Gratitude, love, respect. You never stopped believing, he said. Because I never stopped knowing, she replied. As night fell, the world outside grew quiet, but inside that small home a new chapter had begun. One filled with promise, with change, with everything they had been waiting for. Okafor lay down beside Diana, staring up at the ceiling. The same ceiling, the same room, but everything felt different. Tomorrow, he would step into a new life, a better life, a life he would build for both of them. He reached for Diana's hand and held it gently. I won't forget this, he whispered. Diana squeezed his hand, but life had other plans. The first morning of Okafor's new life did not look very different from the last morning of his old one. The same narrow room, the same patched walls, the same early sunlight slipping through the cracks. But everything felt different. Okafor stood in front of the small mirror nailed to the wall, adjusting his collar for what felt like the 10th time. His reflection stared back at him, familiar, yet somehow renewed. There was a sharpness in his eyes now, a quiet fire that hadn't been there before. Behind him, Diana moved around the room, humming softly as she packed a small lunch for him. The sound was light, cheerful, like a melody of relief after a long storm. Stop looking at yourself like you're about to meet a king, she teased, glancing at him. Okafor smirked slightly. In a way, I am my future. Diana laughed. That's better. I like this version of you. He turned toward her. And which version is that? The one who remembers who he is, she said simply. Her words lingered for a moment. Then she handed him the small food flask. Don't forget to eat, she added. Yes, Ma, he replied playfully. But before he could leave, she reached out and straightened his collar. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. Go and make us proud, she said softly. Okafor nodded. I will. The office was everything he had imagined and more. Glass walls, polished floors, cool air conditioning that made the outside heat feel like a distant memory. People moved. With purpose, their voices measured their steps confident. This was a world of structure, of opportunity, of power. And now he was part of it. Mr. Okafor. He turned. A well-dressed man approached him, extending a hand. I'm Mr. Adeyemi, your supervisor. Welcome aboard. Okafor shook his hand firmly. Thank you, sir. Come, I'll show you around. As they walked through the office, Okafor took everything in. The rows of desks, the hum of computers, the quiet intensity of focused work. This is the operations department, Mr. Adeyemi explained. You'll be working closely with the team here. We value efficiency, attention to detail, and initiative. Okafor nodded. I understand, sir. I've gone through your file, Mr. Adeyemi continued. You have solid experience. I expect you to prove that we made the right choice. I won't disappoint you, Mr. Adeyemi gave a small approving nod. We'll see. The first few weeks were intense, demanding, exhausting, but Okafor thrived. He arrived early, stayed late, learned quickly. Where others hesitated, he stepped forward. Where problems arose, he found solutions. People began to notice. Who's the new guy? One colleague whispered. The one handling those reports. That's Okafor. He's good. No, he was more than good. He was hungry, and hunger, when channeled correctly, could become unstoppable. At home, Diana noticed the change immediately, not just in their circumstances, but in him. He walked differently now, spoke differently, carried himself with a confidence that was both familiar and new. How was work, she asked one evening, serving him dinner. Busy, he replied, loosening his tie, but productive. She smiled. I knew you'd excel. He nodded, distracted, already reaching for his phone. It was subtle, but it was there. The first salary came like a dream. Okafor stared at the alert on his phone, blinking as though it might disappear if he looked too long. It was more money than he had seen in months, maybe years. Diana, he called out. She rushed in. What happened? He showed her the screen. For a second she didn't react. Then tears, pure uncontrollable tears. God has done it, she whispered. Okafor laughed, pulling her into a tight embrace. This is just the beginning, he said. And for once he was right. Everything began to move fast after that, too fast. Within months, Okafor earned a promotion, then another. His efficiency, his drive, his ability to adapt it set him apart. Opportunities followed him. Money followed him. Recognition followed him. And with each step forward, something else quietly slipped behind. The day he told Diana they were moving out, she thought he was joking. A new place, she asked. Yes. How new? Okafor smiled. You'll see. The car ride felt unreal. Diana sat quietly, her hands clasped together as she watched the surroundings change. From narrow, dusty roads to wide, tarred streets, lined with well-kept houses. Then they stopped in front of a mansion. Diana blinked. Okafor. He stepped out of the car, walked around, and opened her door. Welcome home. She stepped out slowly, her eyes scanning the building. The tall gates, the painted walls, the quiet elegance. This is ours, she asked, her voice trembling. Okafor nodded. Yes. She covered her mouth, overwhelmed. We used to pray for a better roof, she whispered. Now we have this. Okafor watched her. For a moment he felt proud. Deeply proud. I told you, he said softly, things would change. They moved in that same week. New furniture, new clothes, New lifestyle. Diana tried to adjust. She really did. But sometimes she felt like a visitor in her own life. One evening, Okafor stood by the window, looking out at the quiet street. Diana, he called. She walked in. Yes. He turned. I've been thinking. She smiled. That's usually dangerous. He chuckled slightly. You should stop the business. The words landed gently but heavily. Diana blinked. Stop my stall. Yes, he said. We don't need it anymore. She hesitated. But it's not just about the money, she said. It's something I built. It kept us. I know. He cut in. And I appreciate it. But things are different now. She looked at him carefully. Different. Yes, he continued. We have a certain image to maintain. It doesn't look right you standing by the roadside selling food. The words stung not because they were loud, but because they were unfamiliar. This wasn't the Okafor who once sat beside her at that same stall laughing over burned takara. This was someone else. Someone polished, refined, distant. Are you ashamed of me? She asked, quietly. Okafor frowned. No, that's not what I'm saying. It sounds like it. He sighed. I'm trying to elevate our life, Diana. You should be enjoying this, not stressing yourself out in the sun. She looked down. Part of her understood. Part of her resisted. But the part that loved him, the part that trusted him, spoke louder. All right, she said softly. Okafor relaxed. Good. It's for the best. But as she walked away, something inside her shifted small, almost unnoticeable but real. That night Diana lay awake longer than usual. The room was bigger, the bed softer, the air cooler, but something felt off. She turned slightly and looked at Okafor. He was asleep, peaceful, unbothered. She smiled faintly. Maybe I'm just adjusting, she whispered to herself. Maybe. Outside the world remained quiet, but inside their new life change had begun. Not loud, not dramatic, just a subtle shift in direction, like a road that looks straight until you realize too late it has been curving all along. The invitation arrived on a quiet Tuesday evening. Okafor had just returned from work. His tie slightly loosened, his phone still buzzing with unread messages. He dropped his briefcase on the polished table in the living room, a habit he had picked up recently, and reached for the envelope placed neatly beside it. Diana had left it there. She always noticed the little things. What's that? She asked from the kitchen, her voice warm, carrying the faint aroma of stew simmering on the stove. Okafor turned the envelope over in his hands. It was thick, expensive, the kind that announced importance without needing to say much. Looks like an invitation. He replied. Open it. Diana said, stepping into the living room, wiping her hands on a clean cloth. He slid a finger under the seal and pulled out the card. His eyes scanned it quickly, then slowed, then sharpened. A corporate gala, he said almost to himself, hosted by the executive board. Diana's eyes lit up. That sounds big. It is, he said, nodding. Very big. She stepped closer, peering at the card. Does it say you can come with someone? Okafor hesitated just for a second. Then he looked again. Yes, he said. +1. Diana smiled, a genuine, excited smile that lit up her entire face. I've never been to something like that before, she said softly. Okafor looked at her simple dress, at the way she stood, comfortable, unpretentious. For a fleeting moment, something in his chest tightened. Yeah, he said. It'll be nice. The days leading up to the gala were filled with preparation, but not the kind Diana expected. Okafor became increasingly occupied. Late nights at work, calls that stretched into hours, meetings that couldn't wait. Are you sure everything is okay? Diana asked one evening as he adjusted his cufflinks in front of the mirror. Just work. He replied quickly. This event is important. I understand, she said. I was just wondering when we'd go shopping. He paused. Shopping for the gala. She said, smiling lightly. I need something to wear, don't I? Okafor's expression shifted, subtle but noticeable. Oh, that. Diana frowned slightly. What do you mean? That he turned to face her. It's a very formal event, Diana. High-level executives, investors, people like that. She nodded slowly. Okay. I just think. He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Maybe it might be overwhelming for you. The room went quiet. Diana blinked. I can learn, she said gently. You can guide me. It's not about learning. He replied a bit too quickly. It's just a different environment. She studied his face, trying to understand what he wasn't saying. What are you really saying, Okafor? She asked softly. He sighed. I'm saying maybe I should go alone this time. There it was, plain final. Diana felt something twist inside her chest, but she forced a smile. If that's what you think is best, she said. Okafor nodded, relieved. It is. But as he turned away, he missed the way her smile faded. The night of the gala arrived with elegance and quiet attention. Okafor stood in front of a full-length mirror in their bedroom, adjusting his suit, tailored sharp, expensive. Everything about his appearance spoke of success. Behind him, Diana stood near the bed. She had dressed up anyway, not in something extravagant. She didn't have that, but in her best dress, carefully ironed, carefully chosen. Her hair was neatly styled, her face lightly made up. She looked beautiful, but not in the way the world Okafor was entering would define beauty. You look nice, Okafor said, glancing at her briefly. Thank you, she replied. A pause. You'll be back late, she asked. Yes. Okay. Another pause. Then he picked up his keys. I'll see you later. And just like that, he left. Diana stood there for a long time after the door closed. The silence that followed felt louder than any noise. Slowly, she sat on the bed and looked down at her hands, then at her reflection in the mirror. Maybe he's right, she whispered. But even as she said it, something didn't feel right. The gala was everything Okafor expected, and more. The venue was grand, lit with soft golden lights that reflected off polished floors and crystal chandeliers. Soft music played in the background, blending seamlessly with the hum of sophisticated conversations. People moved gracefully, dressed in elegance, carrying themselves with effortless confidence. This was power. This was influence. And tonight Okafor belonged. Mr. Okafor. He turned, greeted by a colleague. You made it. Of course. Okafor replied with a smile. They exchanged pleasantries, moving deeper into the crowd. For the first time, Okafor felt completely in sync with his environment. No hesitation, no doubt, just presence. Then he saw her. Tracy. She stood near the bar, a glass of wine in her hand, laughing softly at something someone had said. Her dress was sleek, perfectly fitted, her posture confident, her presence magnetic. She wasn't just beautiful. She was commanding. The kind of woman who didn't ask for attention. She drew it effortlessly. Okafor's gaze lingered longer than it should have, and as if sensing it, she turned. Their eyes met. For a moment, everything else faded. Then she smiled. Not a wide smile, not overly inviting, just enough, and that was all it took. Later they found themselves standing closer, introduced through a mutual acquaintance. Okafor, this is Tracy, the man said. One of our top consultants. Tracy extended her hand. Nice to meet you. Her voice was smooth, confident. Okafor took her hand. The pleasure is mine. Her grip was firm but not aggressive. Her eyes held his just long enough to leave an impression. I've heard about you, she said. He raised an eyebrow. Only good things, I hope. She smirked slightly. We'll see. He chuckled. And just like that, a conversation began. They talked. First about work, then about ideas, then about ambition. Tracy spoke with intelligence and clarity. She challenged. His thoughts questioned, his assumptions pushed him to think deeper, and Okafor loved it. It had been a long time since he felt mentally matched, engaged, stimulated. You're different, Tracy said at one point. He leaned slightly closer. How so? You don't think small, she replied. Most people do. He smiled. I've learned not to. She studied him. Good. There was something in her tone, something approving, something dangerous. As the night went on, the distance between them shrank, subtly, naturally, almost unnoticed. Do you always come alone to events like this? Tracy asked casually. Okafor hesitated. Then, yes. The lie slipped out easily. Too easily. She nodded. I prefer that too, she said. Less distraction. He felt something shift inside him, a line blurring. When the event ended, Okafor stepped outside into the cool night air. But his mind wasn't on the gala or the deals or the connections. It was on her. Tracy. Her voice, her confidence, the way she made him feel seen. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone. There was already a message from her. It was nice meeting you. He stared at the screen, then typed back. The feeling is mutual. He hit send. And just like that, something had begun. Back home, Diana was asleep. Or at least she looked like she was. Okafor entered quietly, loosening his tie. Placing his keys down, he glanced at her briefly, then looked away. He didn't notice the slight movement of her fingers or the way her breathing shifted. She wasn't fully asleep, and somewhere deep inside her she felt it. Not the details, not the truth, but the change. That night, as Okafor lay beside her staring at the ceiling, his mind was no longer at home. And sometimes that's where betrayal truly begins. Not in actions, but in attention. It started with a message. Not dramatic, not suspicious. Just a simple notification that lit up Okafor's phone screen early one morning. Good morning. Hope you're ready to conquer the world today. Tracy. Okafor stared at it for a few seconds longer than necessary. A small smile tugged at the corner of his lips. Felt nice. He typed back quickly. Always. And you? The reply came almost instantly. Already ahead of the world. He chuckled under his breath. Behind him, Diana stirred in bed. Who is that? She asked sleepily. Okafor locked his phone without thinking. Work, he replied. It wasn't entirely a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. At first, the messages were harmless. Short exchanges during work hours, occasional jokes, light conversations about projects, clients, business trends. Nothing Diana couldn't have seen. Nothing Okafor couldn't justify. But then they started to stretch. Morning messages turned into midday check-ins. Midday check-ins turned into evening conversations. Evenings turned into late-night chats. Why are you still awake? Diana asked one night, her voice soft with sleep. Just finishing something. Okafor said, his eyes fixed on his phone. What kind of work keeps you smiling like that? She teased lightly. He didn't look up. Just work. Diana watched him for a moment, then turned over. Something about his tone felt distant. At the office, Tracy became a constant presence. Not always physically close, but always within reach. A glance across the room, a shared look during meetings, a subtle smile that seemed meant only for him. Lunch, she asked one afternoon, leaning casually against his desk. Okafor looked up. There was confidence in her stance, effortless, natural. "Don't you have a meeting?" he asked. She shrugged. "It can wait." He hesitated, just for a second. Then he stood. All right. Lunch became their thing. At first, it was just convenient two professionals discussing work over food. But soon it became more. They talked about ambition, about success, about the kind of life they wanted to build. "You don't strike me as someone who settles," Tracy said one day, stirring her drink absent-mindedly. Okafor leaned back slightly. "I don't." "Good," she replied, "because settling is dangerous." He raised an eyebrow. "How so?" "It makes you comfortable," she said, "and comfort kills growth." Her words lingered, uncomfortably. Okafor thought of Diana, of their quiet evenings, of her simple joys. Was that comfort, or was it something else? He pushed the thought away. At home, the distance grew slowly, so slowly that it almost went unnoticed. Almost. Diana noticed the little things first. The way he no longer asked about her day. The way his attention drifted even when he was physically present. The way his laughter, once easy and frequent, now came from behind a glowing screen. "Okafor," she called one evening. He didn't respond. "Okafor." Still nothing. She walked closer. He was sitting on the couch, his eyes locked on his phone, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Who are you talking to?" she asked. He looked up, startled. "No one," he said quickly. Diana frowned slightly. "You were smiling." "It was a message from work," he replied. She held his gaze for a moment longer than usual, then nodded. "Okay." But her heart didn't settle. The first real shift happened on a Friday evening. "Stay back," Tracy said as most of the office began to empty. Okafor glanced at her. "For what?" She smiled. "A drink. You look like you need one." He hesitated. "I should head home." "Or," she countered smoothly, "you could stay and unwind for once." He thought about it. "Just one drink. Nothing wrong with that." "All right," he said. The bar wasn't far. Dim lights, soft music, a quiet kind of elegance. They sat across from each other, drinks in hand. For the first time, the conversation wasn't about work. It was personal. "So," Tracy said, tilting her head slightly. "What's your story?" Okafor exhaled slowly. "It's not very interesting." "Try me." And so he told her. Not everything, but enough. About losing his job, about struggling, about starting over. Tracy listened. Really listened. "That must have been hard," she said. "It was. And now look at you," she added. "You rose." He smiled faintly. "Not alone." She raised an eyebrow. "No, my wife," he said. "She held everything together when I couldn't." Tracy nodded slowly. "Loyal," she said. "Yes." There was a brief silence. Then, "Is she like you?" Tracy asked. Okafor frowned slightly. "What do you mean? Driven, ambitious, forward-thinking?" He hesitated. "Not in the same way," he admitted. Tracy took a sip of her drink. "Interesting." That was all she said. But it was enough. That night, Okafor returned home later than usual. Diana was waiting. She sat on the couch, her hands folded, her expression calm but alert. "You're late," she said. "Work," he replied, placing his keys down. "You smell like alcohol." He paused, then shrugged. "I had a drink with colleagues." Colleagues, she repeated. Yes. She studied him, trying to read between the lines. But he gave her nothing. Okay, she said finally. But her voice carried something new. Doubt. Days turned into weeks, and the line between harmless and harmful disappeared. Tracy and Okafor began meeting outside work more often. Dinner, drinks, long conversations that stretched into the night. You're easy to talk to, Tracy said one evening. So are you, he replied. She smiled. I know. He laughed, and in that moment he forgot. Forgot the small house they once shared. Forgot the woman who believed in him when no one else did. Forgot the life he had promised to protect. At home, Diana felt it. The shift, the absence, the growing silence. One night she reached for his hand in bed. He didn't respond. He was awake but somewhere else. Okafor, she whispered. Are you happy? The question caught him off guard. He turned slightly. Why would you ask that? She hesitated. Because you don't feel like yourself anymore. He frowned. I'm just busy. It's more than that, she said softly. He sighed. You're overthinking. She withdrew her hand slowly. Maybe. But deep down she knew something was changing. And sometimes the most dangerous changes are not loud. They don't announce themselves. They don't crash into your life and demand attention. They slip in quietly. One message, one conversation, one moment at a time. Until one day you look back and realize you've drifted too far to see where you started. The change did not happen overnight. If it had, Diana might have recognized it sooner, might have confronted it, fought it, named it for what it was. But this change was quiet, subtle like a shadow that grows longer with the setting sun. So gradual you don't notice it until everything is covered. It began with small irritations. Things that once felt normal now felt misplaced. One evening, Diana set the table for dinner, carefully arranging the plates the way she always did. Simple, neat, thoughtful. Food is ready, she called. Okafor walked in, his phone in hand, his attention split between the glowing screen and the room around him. He glanced at the table, then paused. Why are we still using these plates? He asked. Diana blinked. These plates? Yes, he said, picking one up slightly. They look old. She frowned lightly. We've always used them. That was before, he replied. The words landed harder than he intended. Before what? She asked. Okafor exhaled, already slightly irritated. Before things changed, Diana. There it was again. Changed. Everything now seemed to revolve around that word. Diana forced a small smile. They still work, she said gently. And they remind me of where we started. Okafor set the plate down. I don't want to be reminded of where we started, he said. Silence, heavy, unexpected. Diana's fingers tightened slightly around the edge of the table. She didn't respond, because she didn't know how to. At work things were different. There Okafor felt aligned, in control, seen, especially when he was around Tracy. You handled that meeting well, she said one afternoon as they walked side by side down the corridor. Just doing my job, he replied. She smirked. No, you did more than that. You commanded the room. He glanced at her. There it was again, that look, that quiet admiration that made him feel larger than himself. You think so? He asked. I know so, she said confidently. They stopped near the elevator. You don't even realize how much you've grown, she added. It's almost frustrating. Okafor chuckled. Frustrating, yes, she said. Because you're still holding on to things that don't match who you've become. He frowned slightly. What do you mean? The elevator doors opened, but neither of them moved. Tracy leaned slightly closer. I mean, she said softly, you're evolving, but your life isn't keeping up. The words slid into his mind like a key into a lock. Click. Something opened. That evening, Okafor returned home earlier than usual. Diana was in the living room, folding clothes neatly into a small basket. She looked up as he entered. You're early, she said, surprised. Yeah, he replied, loosening his tie. Meetings ended sooner than expected. She smiled. That's good. There was a pause. A brief, hopeful moment where she thought maybe tonight would be different. Sit, she said. I'll bring food. But before she could stand, Okafor spoke. Diana, we need to talk. Her heart skipped. There was something about his tone. Serious, measured, unfamiliar. She sat back down slowly. Okay. Okafor remained standing. I've been thinking a lot lately, he began. Diana nodded, waiting. About us. About our life. A small knot formed in her chest. What about it? He hesitated, then continued. I feel like we're not on the same level anymore. The words hit like a quiet explosion. Diana blinked. I don't understand, she said. Okafor ran a hand through his hair. I've grown, Diana. My environment has changed. The people I interact with, the expectations, the lifestyle. Everything is different now. And, she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, and you haven't changed with it. Silence, complete. Diana stared at him, as if trying to recognize the man standing before her. I'm still the same person you married, she said slowly. That's the problem, he replied. The air shifted. Something fragile cracked. Diana stood up, slowly, carefully, as if sudden movement might break something else. So, what are you saying? She asked. Okafor exhaled. I'm saying you need to adapt. I stopped my business, she said quickly. You asked me to. I did. I've tried to fit into this new life. It's not enough, he interrupted. Her voice trembled slightly. Then what is enough? Okafor opened his mouth, but no clear answer came, because the truth was not something he was ready to say out loud. At work, Tracy's voice echoed louder. You've outgrown her. You need someone who understands your world. You can't keep shrinking yourself to fit a life you've already left behind. Each word planted carefully, watered by attention, nurtured by ego. Back at home, Diana sat on the edge of the bed that night, staring at her hands. Okafor was in the bathroom. She could hear the running water. Steady, unbothered. Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Not yet. Instead, she stood up and walked to the mirror. She looked at herself, really looked. At her face, her eyes, her presence. Who am I becoming? She whispered, but no answer came. Days passed, and the distance grew. Not just in conversation, but in connection. Okafor no longer shared his thoughts, no longer laughed the same way, no longer reached for her hand. And when he looked at her, it was different, like he was searching for something that wasn't there. Or worse, like he had already decided it never would be. One evening, Diana tried again. Let's go out, she suggested gently. Okafor looked up from his phone. Out, yes, she said. Just us. Like before. He hesitated, then shook his head. I'm tired. You're always tired, she said quietly. He sighed. Diana, please. Please, what? She asked. Frustration slipping through. Stop making this harder than it needs to be. Her chest tightened. I'm your wife, Okafor. Wanting time with you shouldn't be hard. He stood up abruptly. I deal with enough pressure at work. I don't need it at home too. The words hung in the air sharp cold. Diana stepped back slightly as if physically pushed. Pressure, she repeated softly. Yes. She let out a small disbelieving laugh. I stood by you when you had nothing, she said. When the world turned its back on you. I carried us when you couldn't stand. Her voice broke, but she continued. And now loving you is pressure. Okafor looked away. He didn't respond because deep down he knew. That night they slept on the same bed, but it felt like miles apart. And somewhere in the space between them a new reality settled. Diana was no longer the center of his world. She was becoming a stranger in her own home. The night felt unusually still. Not peaceful, not calm, just still. Like the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for something inevitable to happen. Okafor stood by the large window in the living room, staring out into the darkness. The streetlights cast long shadows across the compound, stretching and bending in ways that felt almost unnatural. His reflection stared back at him from the glass. Sharp suit, confident posture, a man who had everything. And yet something restless lingered beneath the surface. His phone buzzed. He didn't need to check to know who it was. Still he did. Tracy, we need to talk. He exhaled slowly. He already knew what this was about. They met later that evening. Not at the office. Not anywhere public. But at a quiet upscale lounge, tucked away from prying eyes. Tracy was already there when he arrived. She sat elegantly, one leg crossed over the other, a glass of wine resting lightly in her hand. As always, she looked composed, like someone who never second-guessed her place in the world. You're late, she said without looking up. Work, Okafor replied, taking a seat across from her. She smirked faintly. There's always work. There was a pause. Then she looked at him. Direct, focused. We can't keep doing this. Okafor frowned slightly. Doing what this, she said, gesturing between them. Living in between. He leaned back. What are you saying, Tracy? I'm saying I don't share. She replied calmly. The words were simple, but they carried weight. Okafor's jaw tightened. It's not that simple. It is, she said. You're just making it complicated. He ran a hand over his face. You know my situation. Yes, she said. And that's exactly the problem. Silence. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes locking onto his. You've built something new, she continued. A new life. A new version of yourself. But you're still tied to your past. My past, he repeated. You know what I mean. He did. And he didn't like it. Back home, Diana sat quietly in the dimly lit bedroom. She hadn't turned on the main lights. Just the small lamp beside the bed. It cast a soft glow across the room. But it wasn't enough to chase away the heaviness she felt. She had been waiting. Again. But tonight felt different. Her chest felt tight. Her thoughts restless. Her instincts uneasy. She didn't know why. But deep down she felt like something was coming. At the lounge, Tracy's voice softened. But her words didn't. You deserve more, she said. Okafor let out a short laugh. More than what? More than a life that doesn't match who you are anymore. He looked at her. And you think you're that more? She didn't hesitate. Yes, confidence, unshaken, dangerous. Okafor swallowed. You're asking me to just what? Walk away from my marriage. I'm asking you to be honest with yourself. She replied. Are you truly happy? The question lingered. Heavy. Unavoidable. Okafor didn't answer immediately, because the truth was complicated. I was, he said finally. Was Tracy, echoed. He looked down. Images flashed through his mind. Diana, at the stall laughing despite the heat. Diana handing him money for transport. Diana believing in him when he couldn't believe in himself. Then the present, the distance, the tension, the disconnect. Tracy leaned closer. "You've changed," she said softly. "And that's not a bad thing. Growth is good, but not everyone grows at the same pace." He closed his eyes briefly. "And what are you saying?" he asked. "I'm saying she's holding you back." The words landed like a stone, cold, heavy, final. Back at home, Diana stood by the window now, the same position Okafor had been in earlier. She wrapped her arms around herself as if trying to hold something together that she couldn't quite see. Her reflection stared back at her. Tired eyes, uncertain expression. A woman who no longer recognized the life she was living. "God," she whispered, "what is happening to my marriage?" At the lounge, the final push came. "If you want a future with me, Tracy," said her voice steady, "she has to go. No hesitation, no softness, just truth." Her version of it. Okafor's heart pounded. "That's not something I can just decide overnight." Tracy leaned back, studying him. "You already have," she said. He frowned. "What do you mean?" "You stopped choosing her the moment you started choosing me." Silence. Sharp. Unforgiving. "And now," she continued, "you just need to finish what you started." The drive home felt longer than usual. The road stretched endlessly before him, his thoughts racing faster than the car. He gripped the steering wheel tightly. His mind was loud, conflicting, chaotic. But one voice stood out. "You've outgrown her. She's holding you back. Finish what you started." By the time he pulled into the compound, something inside him had hardened. Diana heard the car. Her heart jumped. She rushed to the living room, wiping her hands on her wrapper nervously. The door opened. Okafor stepped in. Their eyes met. And in that moment she knew something was wrong. "Okafor," she said softly. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he walked past her. Calm, cold, controlled. "Sit down," he said. Her chest tightened. "What is it?" she asked. "Just sit." She obeyed. Slowly, carefully. Okafor stood in front of her. For a moment, he said nothing. Then Diana. "This isn't working." The words hit like a slap. She blinked. "What do you mean?" He exhaled. "This marriage." Her breath caught. "No," she whispered. "No. Don't say that." "I've thought about it," he continued. "And it's clear." Tears filled her eyes instantly. "Clear," she repeated. "What's clear?" Okafor talked to me. He avoided her gaze. "We're not compatible anymore." Her heart shattered. "Compatible?" she cried. "Since when did love become about compatibility?" He remained silent. "You promised me," she continued, her voice breaking. "You said we would face everything together." "I've changed," he said flatly. "And I haven't," she shot back. "I left everything for you. I followed you into this new life. You asked me to stop my business. I did. What else do you want from me?" He clenched his jaw. "It's not enough." The words echoed. Cruel. Unforgiving. Diana stood up suddenly. "Then tell me what is," she demanded. "Tell me what I did wrong." He looked at her, and for a brief moment, there was hesitation. But it passed. "You're not who I need anymore." Silence, total, devastating. Diana staggered back slightly, as if the words had physically struck her. After everything she whispered, Okafor's voice dropped. "You need to leave." Her head snapped up. "What? I want you out of this house." The world stopped. "Okafor, no." She shook her head, tears streaming. Really now. You don't mean that. I do. Where will I go? She asked, her voice trembling. He didn't answer. Okafor, please. She begged, stepping closer. Don't do this. Not like this. Talk to me. Fight for us. It's over, Diana. Final. Cold. Dead. Minutes later, she stood outside. With nothing. No bags. No plan. No direction. The door closed behind her. And just like that, her life ended. Or at least the life she knew inside the house. Okafor stood still, silent, unmoving. Then his phone buzzed. Tracy, is it done? He stared at the message, then typed yes. He hit send, and in that moment, he didn't realize it, but he had just traded everything real for something that would not last. Outside, Diana walked slowly into the night. Her tears blurred her vision, her steps uncertain, her heart completely broken. And somewhere in the distance a bridge waited. The night swallowed Diana whole. There was no gentle transition, no soft landing, just a sudden brutal shift from a home filled with quiet memories to the open, indifferent world. She walked without direction, without purpose. Her feet moved, but her mind lagged behind, still trapped in the moment the door closed behind her. You need to leave. The words echoed over and over, each time cutting deeper than before. She clutched the thin wrapper around her body, pulling it tighter as if it could shield her from the cold or from the reality she couldn't escape. The streets were quieter now. Shops had closed. Voices had faded. Only the occasional passing car broke the silence, its headlights sweeping across her like brief, indifferent glances. Nobody stopped. Nobody asked. Nobody cared. And why would they? To them, she was just another figure in the night. But to herself, she was a woman who had just lost everything. First, she thought of going back. Not to beg, not to plead, but just to knock to see if maybe, just maybe, he would open the door and say it was all a mistake, that he didn't mean it, that he still loved her. She even turned around once, her body moving before her pride could catch up. But then she stopped. Her feet refused to take another step because deep down she knew the man inside that house was no longer the man she married, and no amount of knocking would bring him back. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time had lost its meaning. The night grew colder. Her legs ached. Her throat felt dry, her heart heavy beyond words. She needed somewhere to sit, somewhere to breathe, somewhere to exist. That's when she saw it, the bridge. It wasn't beautiful, not in any way that inspired comfort. Concrete pillars stretched upward, holding the road above like silent giants. Beneath it, shadows pooled in uneven patches, broken only by dim streetlights flickering in the distance. It smelled faintly of dampness and neglect, discarded bottles. Old papers, the forgotten remains of people who had passed through and left nothing behind. Diana hesitated at the edge. This wasn't a place anyone chose. It was a place people ended up. But tonight it was all she had. She stepped under the bridge slowly, carefully, as if crossing into a different world. The ground was rough, beneath her feet cold, unwelcoming. She found a small corner relatively dry and lowered herself down. For a moment she just sat there, listening to the distant hum of cars above, to the occasional rustle of movement nearby, to the sound of her own breathing, uneven, fragile. Then the tears came. Not the quiet kind she had held back earlier. Not the controlled ones that slipped down her cheeks in silence. These were different, raw, unfiltered. She cried, like her heart was breaking all over again. Why? She whispered into the darkness. What did I do wrong? No answer came, only echoes. The first night was the hardest. Sleep didn't come easily. Every sound felt amplified. Every shadow felt alive. At one point, she heard footsteps and froze, her body going rigid. A figure passed by, a man. He didn't look at her, didn't speak, just moved on. Still, her heart raced long after he was gone. Fear had found a place beside her, and it refused to leave. By morning, her body felt heavy, stiff unrest. The early light filtered weakly beneath the bridge, revealing more of her surroundings than she wanted to see. Other people, not many but enough. A woman curled up a few meters away. A young boy, rummaging through a plastic bag. A man sitting against a pillar staring into nothing. This was their reality, and now it was hers too. Hunger came next, slow at first, then sharp, demanding. She hadn't eaten since the day before. Her stomach twisted painfully, reminding her of something she could no longer ignore. Food. She needed food. But how? Diana stood up slowly, brushing dust from her wrapper. Her legs wobbled slightly, but she steadied herself. She stepped out from under the bridge and into the morning. The world had resumed its normal rhythm. People rushed past. Cars honked. Vendors shouted. Life continued unbothered by her existence. She walked toward a small roadside stall, not unlike the one she used to run. The irony didn't escape her. A woman stood behind it serving customers. Diana stopped a few feet away. Her heart pounded. Her pride screamed, but her hunger was louder. She stepped closer. "Please," she began, her voice barely audible. The woman looked up. "Yes," Diana swallowed. "I haven't eaten since yesterday. Can you help me?" The words felt foreign in her mouth, heavy, embarrassing, painful. The woman studied her for a moment. Then, without a word, she scooped a small portion of food onto a plate and handed it to her. "Take," she said simply. Diana's eyes filled instantly. "Thank you," she whispered. She stepped aside and ate slowly, carefully. Each bite tasted like survival. Days passed and survival became routine. Diana learned quickly where to find water, which vendors were kinder than others, how to avoid trouble, how to make herself invisible. She washed her face at public taps, slept in the same corner under the bridge, wrapped herself tightly at night to fight the cold. And through it all she endured. But the hardest part wasn't the hunger, or the cold, or even the fear. It was the memories. They came uninvited, unrelenting. Okafor laughing in their small house. Okafor holding her hand after getting the job. Okafor promising, promising, promising. She would close her eyes and see it all, then open them and see nothing. One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in fading gold, Diana sat at the edge of the bridge watching cars pass above. Her eyes were distant, tired, but not empty. Not yet. A soft breeze brushed against her face. She inhaled slowly, and for the first time in days, she didn't cry, because somewhere deep inside, beneath the pain, beneath loss, beneath the heartbreak, something small remained, a flicker, a quiet, stubborn strength. The same strength that once helped her wake before dawn. The same strength that fed a home when everything else failed. The same strength that believed even when belief seemed foolish. She placed a hand over her chest. "I'm still here," she whispered. And sometimes that's where healing begins. Not in comfort, not in rescue, but in the simple, powerful truth that you survived. And just as the night began to fall again, fate quietly moved closer, because the next chapter would change everything. The sun rose slowly over the bridge that morning, casting a pale golden light across the concrete and dust. Diana was already awake. Sleep had become something shallow, something her body accepted but her mind never fully trusted. She sat up slowly, her back resting against one of the bridge pillars, her wrapper pulled tightly around her shoulders. For a few moments, she simply watched the world wake up. Cars began to move above her. Voices carried faintly through the air. Footsteps passed nearby, people heading somewhere, belonging somewhere. She used to be one of them. Now she was just there. But something felt different that morning. She couldn't explain it. The air felt lighter, or maybe she was just learning how to breathe again. Diana stood and stretched slightly, wincing as stiffness ran through her body. She brushed the dust off her wrapper and walked toward the roadside tap she had grown used to. The water was cold, sharp, but refreshing. She cupped her hands and splashed her face, watching the dirt wash away in thin streams. For a moment she stared at her reflection in the shallow puddle below. It was faint, distorted, but it was still her. Tired, yes. Changed definitely. But still there. I'm still here, she whispered again like a reminder. The day moved slowly as it always did. Diana wandered carefully through the nearby streets, keeping her head low, her presence small. She had learned how to navigate this life without drawing attention. A nod here, a quiet thank you there. Survival had become her rhythm. But by midday the sun had grown harsh, pressing down on everything with relentless heat. Diana found herself walking back toward the bridge, toward the only place that had offered her a kind of shelter. As she approached, something caught her eye: a construction site. It hadn't been active before. Now workers moved around purposefully, voices rising and falling with instructions, tools clanking against metal. Diana slowed her steps. She wasn't curious, not really, but movement always drew attention when you lived in stillness. A black SUV pulled up near the site, clean, polished, out of place. A man stepped out, tall, well-dressed, confident. He removed his sunglasses and began speaking to one of the supervisors. Diana barely glanced at him at first. Men like that didn't belong in her world anymore. But then something about the way he turned, the angle of his face, felt familiar. She looked again, longer this time. Her heart skipped. No, couldn't be. She took a hesitant step forward. Then another. The man turned fully, now scanning the site, and their eyes met. For a brief moment confusion crossed his face. Then recognition hit. Diana. The name fell from his lips like something he hadn't expected to say again. Diana froze. Emeka, she whispered. Time seemed to pause. The noise of the construction site faded into the background. Emeka took a step closer, then another. His eyes moved over her, taking in everything. The worn wrapper, the tired posture, the subtle signs of hardship she couldn't hide. What happened to you? He asked, his voice low, almost disbelieving. Diana opened her mouth, closed it. Where did she even begin? She hesitated. It's a long story. Emeka's expression shifted from shock to concern. Are you staying here? He asked. She nodded slightly. For now. He exhaled slowly, running a hand over his face. This isn't right, he muttered. Diana gave a small, tired smile. Life doesn't always ask what's right. He looked at her again, really looked. This wasn't the Diana he remembered, the lively, strong-willed woman from years ago. But beneath the exhaustion he could still see her. Come, he said suddenly. Diana blinked. Come where? Let's get you something to eat first. She hesitated. I'm okay. You're not. He interrupted gently. There was no judgment in his voice, just truth and something else, care. Diana looked down, at her hands, then back at him. Slowly she nodded. Okay. The restaurant felt like another world, cool air, soft lighting, clean tables. Diana stepped inside carefully, as if afraid she didn't belong there. People glanced at her, not openly, but enough. She felt it, the awareness, the difference. Emeka noticed too. Don't mind them, he said quietly as they sat down. Diana forced a small nod. A waiter approached, slightly hesitant. Emeka handled everything. Bring a full meal, he said firmly, and water. When the food arrived, Diana stared at it for a moment. It had been a long time since she had seen this much food in one place. Go on, Emeka said gently. She picked up the spoon. Her hands trembled slightly, But she ate slowly at first, then with more urgency. Not greed, just need. Emeka watched her silently. His chest tightened. "Diana," he said after a while, "talk to me." She paused, the spoon hovering midair. Then she set it down and she told him everything. She spoke of Okafor, of the job, of the rise, of the change. Her voice remained steady at first, but as she continued it broke. She spoke of the night she was sent away, of the cold, the hunger, the bridge, the silence that followed. Emeka listened, every word, every pause, every tear she tried and failed to hide. By the time she finished, the table was quiet, heavy. Emeka leaned back, slightly shaking his head. "I can't believe this," he said. Diana gave a faint, sad smile. "I couldn't either." He looked at her, his eyes filled with something deeper now, not just sympathy, respect. "You survived all that," he said softly. She nodded. "I didn't have a choice." He leaned forward again. "You do now." She frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "You're not going back there," he said firmly. "Not to that bridge. Not to that life." Diana hesitated. "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not," he cut in. "You're someone I care about." The words hung in the air, simple, honest. Diana felt something shift in her chest, not overwhelming, not sudden, just warmth. "I have space," he continued, "a spare room. You can stay there, get back on your feet." She looked at him, searching his face. There was no pity there, no hidden agenda, just sincerity. "Are you sure?" she asked quietly. "I am." Silence stretched between them. Then Diana nodded. "Thank you." That evening she left the bridge behind, not dramatically, not with celebration, just quietly, one step at a time, as if afraid the moment might disappear if she moved too fast. Emeka's house was warm, comfortable, safe. When she stepped inside, she paused. Her eyes scanned the room, clean walls, soft lighting, a couch that looked inviting, felt unreal. "You can stay here," Emeka said, opening a door to a modest but comfortable room. Diana stepped in slowly, a bed, a window, a small table, simple but everything she didn't have before. She turned back to him, her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered again. He smiled gently. "You're home now." That night Diana lay on the bed. Really lay, not curled up on cold concrete, not half awake in fear, but resting. The silence felt different, not empty, not heavy, just calm. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in a long time, sleep came easily. Outside, the world continued, unaware, unchanged. But for Diana, everything had shifted. Because sometimes a second chance doesn't arrive with noise. It arrives quietly, in the form of a familiar face, kind offer, a door left open, and the courage to walk through it. The first morning in Emeka's house felt unfamiliar, not uncomfortable, just unfamiliar. Diana woke slowly, her body sinking slightly into the softness of the mattress. Beneath her, for a brief moment, she didn't move. She simply lay there, eyes half open, listening. No distant traffic rumbling overhead. No muffled voices of strangers nearby. No cold air biting at her skin, just silence, gentle, peaceful silence. She blinked, then sat up. The room came into focus. The neatly arranged bed, the curtains drawn just enough to let in soft morning light, the small table by the window. It was real, not a dream, not something she had imagined to escape her reality. She was here, safe. Her chest tightened, not with fear, but with something she hadn't felt in a long time, relief. She swung her legs over the side of the bed and stood carefully, as if sudden movement might break the moment. Walking to the window, she pulled the curtain aside slightly. Outside, the compound was calm, well-kept, orderly, a stark contrast to the chaos she had left behind. Diana exhaled slowly. "I'm still here," she whispered again. But this time the words felt different, stronger. A soft knock came at the door. Diana, Emeka's voice. She turned. "Yes." "Are you awake?" "Yes, I am." "Good. Come have breakfast." She hesitated briefly, then nodded even though he couldn't see her. Okay. The dining area was simple but elegant. Emeka was already seated, a cup of tea in his hand. He looked up as she entered. "Good morning," he said with a warm smile. "Good morning," she replied, her voice still carrying a trace of shyness. "Sit," he gestured. She did. There was food on the table: bread, eggs, tea. Diana stared at it for a second, memories of the past days flickering in her mind. "Eat," Emeka said gently, noticing her hesitation. She nodded and reached for the bread. For a while they ate in silence. Not awkward silence, just quiet, comfortable. Then Emeka spoke. "How did you sleep?" Diana paused, then smiled faintly. "Like I haven't in a long time." He nodded. "That's good." Another pause. "Then what do you want to do next?" he asked. She looked up. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said, leaning back slightly, "this is your fresh start. You don't have to rush, but eventually you'll want to move forward." Diana lowered her gaze. Forward. The word felt both hopeful and intimidating. "I don't even know where to begin," she admitted. "That's okay," he said. "You don't have to figure everything out today." She nodded slowly. "Thank you." The days that followed were gentle, intentional. Healing didn't come all at once, came in small, quiet moments. Diana began helping around the house, not because she had to, but because it gave her a sense of purpose again. She cooked, cleaned, rearranged small things. At first, she moved carefully, almost as if she were a guest, but Emeka made it clear she wasn't. "You don't have to ask." Before doing things here, he told her one afternoon. She smiled slightly. "Old habits." "Well," he said lightly, "it's time to build new ones." They spent time together, not in grand dramatic ways, but in simple, meaningful ones. Evenings on the couch talking, occasional walks around the neighborhood, shared meals that turned into long conversations. Emeka never pushed, never rushed her. He gave her space, but never distance, and slowly, Diana began to open up again. One evening they sat outside on the small veranda watching the sky fade into dusk. The air was cool, calm. Diana leaned back slightly, her hands resting in her lap. "It still hurts sometimes," she said quietly. Emeka glanced at her. "I know. I try not to think about it," she continued, "but then something reminds me, and it feels like I'm back there again." He nodded. "That's normal." She looked at him. "Does it ever stop?" He thought for a blank moment. "Not completely," he said honestly, "but it gets easier. The pain loses its control over you." Diana exhaled slowly. "I don't want to be angry," she said. "I don't want to carry bitterness." "You don't have to," he replied. "But how?" she asked. He smiled gently. "By choosing yourself again." She frowned slightly. "What does that mean?" "It means remembering that your life didn't end because someone else made a bad choice," he said. "It means realizing that you still have the power to build something new." Diana absorbed his words slowly, carefully. "Something new," she repeated. Yes. Time passed. Weeks turned into months, and with each passing day Diana became stronger, not just physically, but emotionally. The sadness didn't disappear, but it no longer defined her. She laughed more, spoke more freely, smiled without forcing it, and somewhere along the way something unexpected happened. It started subtly, a look that lasted a little longer, a shared laugh that felt deeper, a moment of silence that didn't feel empty but full. Diana noticed it first, or maybe she felt it. One evening as she handed Emeka a cup of tea, their fingers brushed. It was brief, accidental, but it lingered. She pulled her hand back slightly, her heart beating faster than usual. Emeka noticed too, but neither of them said anything. Later that night, Diana sat alone in her room staring at her hands. "What is this?" she whispered. Scared her, not because it felt wrong, but because it felt right, too right. After everything she had been through, the idea of opening her heart again felt risky, dangerous, but also hopeful. A few days later, Emeka spoke. "Diana," he said gently as they sat together. She looked at him. "Yes, there's something I need to say." Her chest tightened slightly. "Okay." He took a breath. "I care about you," he said, "more than just as a friend." Silence. Diana's heart pounded. "I didn't plan it," he continued, "and I don't want to pressure you, but I can't ignore it either." She looked down, her emotions tangled. "I'm afraid," she admitted. "I know," he said softly. She met his eyes. "What if I get hurt again?" Emeka didn't hesitate. "Then I'll spend every day proving to you that not everyone will." The sincerity in his voice, it reached her deeply. Diana closed her eyes, briefly then opened them. "I don't want to rush," she said. "We won't," he replied. "I need time." "You have it." She studied his face. There was no impatience, no pressure, just understanding, and that made all the difference. Their love didn't explode into existence. It grew slowly, carefully, like something precious that needed time to take root. And when it finally did, it was real. The wedding was simple, quiet, intimate. No grand display, no loud celebration. Just two people choosing each other, fully, freely, without fear. As Diana stood beside Emeka, her heart felt calm, not racing, not uncertain, just steady. This time she wasn't stepping into love blindly. She was stepping into it with strength, with clarity, with the knowledge of what she deserved. As they exchanged vows, Emeka held her hands gently. "I will honor you," he said, "not just in words but in actions." Diana smiled softly. "And I will stand beside you," she replied, "not out of need but out of love." That night as they sat together in their home, Diana rested her head lightly against his shoulder. Peace filled the space around them, not the kind that comes from having everything perfect, but the kind that comes from having everything real. Diana closed her eyes, and for the first time in a long time she didn't think about the past because her present was finally enough. The morning was calm, not the kind of calm that comes before a storm, but the kind that settles in after one has already passed. Diana adjusted her hands gently on the steering wheel as she drove. Her eyes focused on the road ahead. The soft hum of the car filled the silence, blending with the faint music playing from the speakers. Beside her, the passenger seat was empty, but she didn't feel alone, not anymore. There was a quiet confidence in the way she sat, in the way she carried herself. Something steady, something rooted. Life had changed, not suddenly, not magically, but deeply. The city moved around her as it always did, busy, unpredictable, alive, but Diana no longer felt like she was being carried by it. She was moving with it now, in control, present peace. She had woken that morning in a home filled with warmth, a home where her voice mattered, where her presence was valued, where love was not something she had to fight, to keep. Emeka had left earlier for a site inspection, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead before stepping out. "I'll be back before evening," he had said. Diana had smiled. "I'll be waiting." Simple, easy, real. Now, as she drove, her thoughts drifted not to pain, but to reflection. How far she had come from a small roadside stall to a broken night under the bridge, to a second chance to love again. It didn't feel like luck, felt like survival, like growth, like becoming. The road curved slightly ahead, and then she saw it, the bridge. Her hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. Her breath slowed. Time seemed to stretch. She hadn't planned to pass this way, or maybe part of her head. The structure stood the same, unchanged, concrete, silent, holding its place in the world as if nothing had ever happened beneath it. But Diana knew better, because beneath that bridge a version of her had nearly disappeared. She slowed the car, not fully stopping but enough to really look. The shadows beneath the bridge were still there. People moved faintly in the distance. Life continued just as it had when she was one of them. Her chest tightened slightly, not from pain, but from memory. And then she saw him. First it was just a figure, a man, sitting near one of the pillars. His posture slumped, his clothes worn, his presence almost blending into the background. But something about him felt familiar. Diana's heart skipped. No, couldn't be. She slowed the car further, her eyes fixed on him. The man shifted slightly, lifting his head, and in that moment everything stopped. Okafor, she whispered. He looked up. His eyes scanned the road lazily at first, then they landed on her. Recognition didn't come immediately. Time had changed, him worn him down, taken pieces of him that once felt unshakable. His face was thinner, his clothes faded and unkempt, his posture defeated. But then his eyes widened. Diana. Her name left his lips like something fragile, uncertain, unbelievable. Diana pulled the car to a stop. Her heart pounded, not with fear, not with anger, but with something she couldn't quite name. She stepped out slowly. The door closed behind her with a soft click, and for a moment they just stood there looking at each other. Two people who once shared everything, now standing on opposite sides of life. Okafor struggled to stand. His movements were slow, unsteady. Diana, he said again, his voice rough. She didn't move closer, but she didn't step back either. What happened to you? She asked quietly. He let out a hollow laugh. What didn't happen? Silence. The air between them carried years of unspoken words. Tracy. He began, his voice faltering. Diana's expression didn't change. She took everything, he continued. The money, the accounts, even the connections. By the time I realized what was happening, it was too late. He swallowed hard. I lost my job, lost the house, lost everything. Diana listened, calm, still not cold, but not shaken either. Okafor looked at her properly now, at her clothes, her posture, her presence. You, he said slowly. You look different. I am, she replied. There was no pride in her voice, no bitterness, just truth. He shook his head slightly as if trying to process it. I searched for you, he said suddenly. Diana's brow furrowed. You did, yes, he nodded. After everything fell apart, I went back to the house, but you were gone. No one knew where you went. She didn't respond. I didn't think, he trailed off. What? She asked. That you would survive this well, he admitted. The words hung awkwardly between them. Diana inhaled slowly, then exhaled. I didn't think so, either, she said. And for a brief moment they shared something, not connection, but understanding of how life could break you and rebuild you in ways you never expected. Okafor took a step closer. Diana, I made a mistake. She didn't react. A terrible mistake, he continued. I see that now. Still no reaction. I was blind, he said. I let pride and foolishness ruin everything we had. His voice cracked slightly. You stood by me when I had nothing, he said, and I repaid you by throwing you away. Silence, heavy, honest. He looked at her, desperation creeping into his eyes. Can you forgive me? The question lingered. Diana felt it deeply, but her expression remained calm, measured. She stepped a little closer now, not out of obligation, but out of clarity. I forgave you a long time ago, she said softly. Okafor blinked. You did, yes. Relief flickered across his face, but it didn't last, because she continued, but forgiveness doesn't mean I come back. The words were gentle but final. Okafor's shoulders dropped slightly. I understand, he said quietly, and for the first time he truly did. Diana looked at him for a moment longer, not as the man who broke her, not as the man she once loved, but simply as someone who had lost his way. I hope you find your way again, she said. There was no sarcasm, no hidden meaning, just sincerity. She turned, walked back to her car, opened the door, paused for just a second, then she got in. Okafor stood there watching as she started the engine, as the car moved forward as the distance between them grew. Inside the car, Diana exhaled slowly, her hand steady on the wheel, her heart calm. She didn't cry. She didn't look back because she didn't need to. Some bridges are not meant to be crossed twice, not because of anger, not because of pride, but because the person you were when you first crossed them no longer exists. As Diana drove away, the bridge faded into the distance, becoming smaller, less significant until it was just another part of the road behind her. Ahead, the road was open, clear, full of possibility, and this time she was ready for it. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to this channel and tell us where you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.